Election Central on WBBM.
And just days before delegates, elected leaders, and journalists arrive in Chicago for the DNC, Mayor Johnson says he expects the convention to be safe and productive, and that demonstrators will have their voices heard.
Mayor Johnson says there's a reason Time Out magazine listed Chicago as the best convention city of the country, because Chicago is good at it.
The world will get a chance to experience and see what the people of Chicago have always known. We are truly the greatest freaking place in the world.
The mayor says CPD is working with other federal and local law enforcement agencies to ensure a safe convention, and he says demonstrators will not be quieted.
We want to make sure that we protect their rights and make sure that they can do it in a safe way and in an environment that allows their voices to be maximized and heard.
Mayor Johnson says the city is working with protest groups on details regarding sound systems, portable restrooms, and the like. Bernie Tafoya, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
And the Chicago Police Department today showed off the newest part of its strategy to police the area around the DNC, a brand new helicopter. This is the department's first new chopper in more than 15 years. Top brass and others revealed the helicopter during an event near Soldier Field this morning. Beverly Alderman Matt O'Shea says it's a game changer.
This is top of the line. This is a $11 million investment. This thing has everything that our police officers need to safely patrol from the air, providing air support, and also tracking criminals.
It'll be a loud, congested, busy week in Chicago with the Democratic National Convention, and some Chicagoans will do their best to stay away.
Dom Canella was walking along the lakefront not thinking about politics.
Honestly, I'm going to just stay home and try to work from home and avoid the chaos. That's my goal.
What do you do?
I'm a program manager.
Atay is literally going to escape Chicago.
I'm going to go to California, get it right out. I can't deal with the traffic, the people. I don't want to be anywhere near it.
Is that because of the convention you planned this?
It is because of the convention. I had already planned on going to California for a wedding, and I just left earlier when I realized it coincided with the convention.
Isaac Enriquez sells Chicago souvenirs near Monroe Harbor.
I think that if we're over here by the lakefront, if people are coming over here by the lakefront, it probably means they're trying to escape maybe the demonstrations and the traffic jams. Mm-hmm. You think a lot of people will be trying to do that this week, trying to find a place of kind of peace and quiet?
I think so. I mean, it can get chaotic in the city, especially when you're driving down here on Lakeshore Drive, and this area mostly it's a nice place to just sit down.
Terry Keshner, 105.9 WBBM.
Election Central on WBBM.
It's day one of the Democratic National Convention, already shaping up to be an eventful week. WBBM's Carolina Garibay.
Before the official start of the DNC, hundreds of people took to Michigan Avenue over the weekend to march for reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, and an end to the Israel-Hamas war. It was the first of several permitted demonstrations taking place throughout the week. Many of those will be held at or around Union Park near the United Center. Chicago police assure that the city will not see a repeat of 1968's clash between demonstrators and police during the DNC. And inside the United Center, President Biden kicks off the convention with a keynote speech. First Lady Jill Biden and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson are also speaking on day one. The theme is for the people. And throughout the week, Democrats from across the country will also take the stage, including former President Barack Obama and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Carolina Garibay, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Well, this week's Democratic National Convention isn't all about politics. It's also giving some local small businesses a chance to show off what they have to offer.
Just to be here, it's fantastic.
Here is what's called Dempalooza inside McCormick Place, where dozens of local businesses and organizations have their own setups and a chance to chat with DNC attendees. That includes Thad Smith of Westside B-Boys.
I'm a black beekeeper about to witness a black woman become the nominee for the President of the United States. With bees. Come on, dude. Come on. It doesn't get any better than that, bro.
Among those chatting with visitors donning Harris for President shirts was Rhonda Harty with the Bronzeville Community Development Initiative.
It's a little frustrating with the logistics because this is such a big place, but once we get here, everybody is just very well receptive, so it's great.
Smith, Harty, and others we spoke to say while this week's festivities may be overwhelming for the city as a whole, it's special to be a part of it. At McCormick Place, Andy Dane, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
As thousands of people marched near the United Center today, some of the protesters did not stick to the plan, and several arrests were made. WBBM's Brandon Ison was there.
Several dozen Chicago police officers in riot gear responding in quick order to a breach in the metal DNC security perimeter fence on Washington Avenue, about a block from the United Center. Making a few arrests, the remaining couple dozen protesters involved were drawn into a nearby park where they eventually dispersed without further incident. Just before the march on the DNC, which consisted of thousands of demonstrators, we spoke to a resident along the route. Carmen Washington lives in the McRory Senior Apartments. She and other residents told us that Chicago police would not be the antagonists this week.
Do you think that? I don't think so. I don't think the police will instigate anything.
Adding that she takes pride in Chicago's tradition of large free speech gatherings, she predicted that the trouble would come from just a few instigators among the protesters.
Yeah, right. They had people to stir up.
Brandon Ison, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Election Central on News Radio 105.9 WBBM. Live local reporting from United Center and the Democratic National Convention.
On day one of the Democratic National Convention yesterday, some of Kamala Harris's Illinois supporters said they were feeling confident of her victory in November. WBBM's political editor Craig Dellimore is inside the United Center.
There's no question that there's a palpable excitement surrounding the candidacy of Kamala Harris at this convention. There's optimism. But what will it take to keep the momentum of the first weeks going? Illinois delegate and Chicago Alderman Walter Burnett Jr. had a possibly surprising answer.
I think this is the type of momentum that she don't even have to do anything. That momentum is just going to keep rolling because every time that other guy speaks, for which I don't want to say his name, every time he speaks, he put his foot in his mouth. I mean, he's so disrespectful to women. Any man who honored their wives and their mothers and their daughters, man, cannot vote for that guy.
Some of his fellow delegates and public officials do believe it will take a lot of work to keep the momentum going, but they all appear ready to do the work. Covering the Democratic National Convention, Craig Dellimore, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
National political convention delegates are often seasoned politicians who have served in various offices, but the Minnesota delegation has one man who's believed to be the youngest delegate at the DNC.
17-year-old Isaac Winkler says this is only his second trip to Chicago.
I've never been to a nationwide convention. Seeing so many people come and get together like this, it's really a unique experience.
The high school senior from Golden Valley will turn 18 just days before the November election. He tells WBBM he's excited to have fellow Minnesotan Tim Walz as his party's vice presidential nominee.
We couldn't be more happy. He's just a great governor, and the policies that he's implemented are from his heart.
Winkler may be young, but is not a novice to politics. He says he's volunteered on campaigns before. His father is a former state representative and was the Democratic majority leader of the Minnesota House. Nancy Harty, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Election Central on WBBM News Radio. Local reporting from the Democratic National Convention at United Center.
We're learning new details about arrests made outside the United Center yesterday afternoon. WBBM's Rachel Pierson reports there's conflicting information from Chicago police and a local legal group.
13 protesters were taken into custody on day one of the Democratic National Convention. Several of those arrests stemmed from a security fence breach outside the United Center.
We got in there as quickly as we could. Our officers showed great restraint.
Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling says officers were pepper sprayed and had objects thrown at them. Those arrested are charged with trespassing, resisting arrest, and aggravated battery of police. And while Snelling claims police handled the situation perfectly, the National Lawyers Guild Chicago says otherwise.
The volunteers with the National Lawyers Guild observed multiple incidences where the Chicago Police Department used excessive force.
Matthew McLaughlin is the organization's mass defense coordinator. He says at least one protester was hospitalized after being assaulted by a Chicago police officer Sunday night, and that Monday's arrests infringed on protest protesters' rights.
We had demonstrators who were in custody and were denied access to the phone for several hours.
Rachel Pierson, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Small park near the United Center is a focal point of protest activities this week. Tucked inside a West Side residential area, it's also where DNC security perimeter fencing was breached momentarily by protesters yesterday. WBBM's Brandon Ison reports from Park 578.
More than 24 45-minute speaking slots have been pre-approved by Chicago officials for various groups using city-provided PA equipment placed in Park 578 throughout the week of the DNC, with the United Center within view of the small neighborhood park, which is also a stop along many of the planned protest routes. The city giving permission of the route and the park's use, but not all neighbors are necessarily thrilled.
They protect more of the United Center than they do the actual residents. Like, here it is, they blocked off all these different avenues to protect them and not enough of us. Protesters come in, they protest where our kids should be playing. They should be freely enjoying themselves.
Some of the issues Park 578 neighbors tell us they are having this week include parking, limited access to the park and its playground, along with other impacts on the children.
They're fearful of what's going on. They're hearing loud noises, screaming, and whatever rights that the people have, they have it. However, I do believe that if this was in a different community, it would not have went this route. They wouldn't have allowed certain things.
On the west side, Brandon Ison, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Here in Chicago at the DNC, a vibrant voice is rallying young voters.
You may know Ben de la Creme from her appearance on RuPaul's Drag Race and massive social media presence, but this week she's turning the spotlight from her dazzling performances to civic engagement.
Our real intention this election is to get Gen Z more engaged in the political process and to get them registered to vote and get them to get out the vote.
Speaking to young voters at the DNC, Ben de la Creme says the LGBTQ plus community's come a long way in recent years, but those hard-won victories aren't guaranteed.
And the 500 plus anti-LGBTQ plus bills that were, being pushed forward in the last year, flooding the lower court system, only one needs to make it to the Supreme Court, and we saw that with Roe versus Wade as well. This is just one of the ways that this intersectionality is so important, and we have to support each other. We have to hold each other's burdens so we can all make it through.
At McCormick Place, Rachel Pierson, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
During the ceremonial roll call of the states to nominate Kamala Harris as the Democratic Party's candidate for president tonight, Governor Pritzker got to announce the vote. That part of our coverage from WBBM political editor Craig Dellimore.
When it came time for Illinois to cast its delegates' vote, State Democratic Party Chair Lisa Hernandez passed the mic to Governor J.B. Pritzker, who did the usual celebratory recitation.
The great state of Illinois, the Prairie State, home of 4 presidents, including President Barack Obama. The birthplace of skyscrapers and the adopted home of Superman. The cornerstone of the Midwest Blue Wall. The first state to ratify the 13th Amendment ending slavery.
And when it was over, he said the state casts 176 votes for Kamala Harris. At the United Center, Craig Dellimore, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
WBBM News Radio, Election Central. Complete coverage from the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago.
A clash between police and pro-Palestinian protesters tonight led to the arrest of about a dozen protesters. WBBM's Brandon Ison was right there.
As the zip-tied protesters were lined up, processed, and loaded into a police vehicle on Canal Street just south of Monroe, they did hear some support from the sidewalk from remaining pro-Palestinian protesters that had not been detained from what had already been a small group of about 30 total. The arrests came after at least 2 separate altercations with police, the first just before 8 p.m. in front of the Israeli Consulate in the intersection of West Madison and Clinton. The protesters had locked arms and tried to push through a wall of several dozen police officers wearing the riot uniform with light blue helmets and batons in hand or hanging from their belts. It appears the protesters, organized by the group behind enemy lines, had been attempting to march west on Madison toward the United Center where the DNC is taking place. The entire protest lasted about 3 hours with a nearly total dispersal by about 10 p.m. In the West Loop, Brandon Ison, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Thousands of people are in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, but some local restaurants say business is kind of slow.
It's the start of lunch hour at Pittsfield Cafe, which sits on Washington Street just off Michigan Avenue in the Loop. Normally, the eatery would be packed with hungry customers.
But as you see, there's a lot of empty spots.
Manager Marcel Rodriguez says she expected a lot more foot traffic during the DNC. She even brought in extra staff to prepare for the rush.
I don't know what's going on. I think the people stay at home, and that's it.
Rodriguez says sales are about half of what they usually are on any given day. Some other restaurants in the Loop tell WBBM business is down significantly. Rachel Pierson, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
It's day 3 of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where police say they did what was necessary to protect the city in making dozens of arrests during a protest outside the Israeli Consulate last night. The latest now in our top story from WBBM's Terry Keshner.
We will not allow people to come to this city, disrespect it, and destroy it.
Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling responded with resolve and emotion.
We expect the rest of the week to be better. That's what we're hoping for. We're hoping that people see that the Chicago Police Department is prepared, ready, willing, and able to defend this city.
2 officers were injured in the confrontations with protesters. So were 2 of the protesters. 3 journalists were among those arrested. And Superintendent Snelling seemed to also make the case for a different path for Chicago long after the convention ends.
It's time to get a handle on anyone who wants to wreak havoc on this city, people who are committing violent acts throughout the city. It is time to bring Chicago back to where we know it can be. But that's going to take all of us.
Terry Keshner, 105.9 WBBM.
On day 3 of the Democratic Convention, several local vendors are inviting delegates and volunteers to let out their creative side at McCormick Place.
From festive DNC-themed manicures, they are gorgeous, to bedazzled Kamala Harris iron-on patches.
We have one that says, "I'm with her." Then we have the pink and green because that symbolizes the AKA sorority that she's in.
To make your own DNC Harris friendship bracelets.
I have DNC spelled out with some stars and then some red, white, and blue beads.
There's no shortage of creative ways to commemorate the DNC at Dempalooza, which features more than 75 Chicago vendors, including Nail Issues, Patch Party Club, and Denaya Designs for You, which are also all black and women-owned. Ebony Anderson of Nail Issues says arts and crafts and manicures are more than just some fun ways to pass the time.
It's important to be here to showcase more minority-owned businesses, especially Black-owned businesses by women. We're a part of history.
Carolina Garibay, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Well, the FBI and Chicago police investigating whether someone tried to contaminate a breakfast for delegates to the Democratic National Convention. WBBM's Jim Gudas is live at the Anchor Desk with what we've learned so far. Jim.
Lisa, a statement from the DNC Joint Information Center says multiple females entered the Fairmont Hotel and placed unknown objects onto tables containing food before leaving the area. One person was treated on scene for an unspecified condition. As for what was left on the tables, descriptions have ranged from maggots to crickets. A spokesperson for the Fairmont Hotel says the area was immediately cleaned and sanitized, allowing the event to continue without further incident. A spokesperson for the Indiana Democratic Party who attended the breakfast praised the quick response and said the Americans have right to peaceful protests, but attacks such as this have no place in our democracy. Live at the Anchor Desk, Jim Gudas, News Radio 105.9 WBBM. Parents with ties to Chicago pleaded for the release of their son and other hostages held by Hamas during an emotional speech at the DNC last night.
The father of Hirsch Goldberg Poland says there's a surplus of agony in the war between Israel and Hamas and no winners in what he called a competition of pain. John Poland and Rachel Goldberg took to the stage to chants of bring them home.
Anyone who is a parent or has had a parent can try to imagine the anguish and misery that John and I and all the hostage families are enduring.
The couple grew up in the Chicago area before moving to Jerusalem in 2008. Their 23-year-old son is one of 8 Americans among the more than 100 hostages being currently held by Hamas. They were the first hostage family to speak at the convention. No families of Palestinians have addressed the group about the war that has deeply divided Democrats. Nancy Harty, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
United Center neighbors continue to feel the impact of the Democratic National Convention in town this week. That story from WBBM's Brandon Ison.
It's just unbelievable how people get together for things that they believe in. And it's a good thing. To me, it's a good thing.
Julia lives in the West Haven Park building at the corner of Lake and Walcott. We spoke to her as thousands of demonstrators made their way under the L tracks on Lake Street, right past her doorstep. A wall of Chicago police officers between her and them. She says in addition to not feeling any sense of fear from the demonstrations this week, that in her opinion, Chicago police have done an excellent job of keeping the peace.
They've been awesome. They have been awesome. They have been patient. They have been alert and keeping us safe and very respectful to the protesters.
And while many nearby residents did enjoy a little free speech and added excitement, there were many who also found the demonstrations disruptive and confusing, particularly when it came down to parking and the use of a small neighborhood park. Brandon Ison, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Election Central on News Radio 105.9 WBBM. Live local reporting from United Center and the Democratic National Convention.
Now that the Democratic National Convention is over, Illinois Democrats say the work begins immediately to work toward a victory in November. WBBM's political editor Craig Dellimore has more.
No matter what happens in November, history has been made here. Kamala Harris is the first African-American woman or Asian American nominated for president by a major party. But Illinois Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, a longtime female empowerment advocate, says Democrats are working hard to see that Harris crosses the finish line.
When you say break the glass ceiling, I think it feels empowering to women across the country. The excitement, the optimism is just pretty overwhelming, which I'm so happy about. There's so much hope.
Clearly, Hillary Clinton, who made the unsuccessful run against Donald Trump in 2016, feels that. She made a powerful and enthusiastic rallying cry for Kamala Harris earlier this week. At the United Center, Craig Dellimore, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
The DNC is now in the rearview mirror, but the campaigning continues. And as WBBM's Mike Krauser reports, so does the work returning the city to its residents.
We're near the United Center, where many streets are still barricaded and will be for some time. Reopenings are happening piecemeal, and there is a lot of work to be done. That will continue throughout the weekend here and around McCormick Place. With the convention behind us, there is now reflection. Police Superintendent Larry Snelling.
What we've learned here is that preparation is everything. 2 things you need for success: opportunity and preparation. We had the opportunity to respond to the Democratic National Convention, and we were prepared for it. And that preparation came through training, and our officers just worked with a level of pride that was just unbelievable.
Predictions of mayhem didn't really come to pass. There was some, but nothing like some feared. We know some downtown dwellers who left town for the week expecting the worst. Mike Krauser, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.
Our top local story on News Radio WBBM. Democratic National Convention delegates are starting to head home today after being energized over the nomination of Kamala Harris as president. WBBM's Bernie Tafoya talked to some of them at Midway Airport.
The convention was nothing short of amazing. Daryl Parks is returning home to Tallahassee, Florida to campaign for Kamala Harris and other Democrats. Every delegate we spoke with had nothing but positive things to say, not only about the convention, but about Chicago and its people. Patrick McGill of Washington, D.C. sampled some of the great food, biked along the lakefront, and went to Wrigley Field.
An amazing city. I had gone to the convention in 2012 in Charlotte, and that city could barely handle all the incoming people from around the country. Chicago handled it without a hiccup.
Juanita Martinez of Eagle Pass, Texas, a key point in the immigration debate, wanted to thank Chicago for its hospitality.
I just want to send out a big old thank you. Thank you.
We'll be back. Just to visit.
Yeah, just to visit. We'll be back just to visit.
Another Texas delegate also loved the weather, and he said he's going back to triple-digit temps. At Midway Airport, Bernie Tafoya, News Radio 105.9 WBBM.